Hi everyone, my name is Ilsun Lee and I'm a product manager within the Google Cloud working on key management and encryption. And along with me, I have my colleague Joseph Valente, who is the product manager for the key access justification. And we're here to talk to you about the new world of controlling your data in the cloud with EKM and KJ. So in this session today, we're going to talk about some of the innovations from the Google Cloud platform that's going to help you really have tight control over your data in the cloud to an unprecedented degree. And by the end of this presentation, you'll understand how the system works and how it's going to benefit you. And hopefully some of you will actually give it a try as well and understand how you can actually use it to protect your most sensitive data. So in this talk, we'll have three primary sections. First, we'll talk about the current encryption that's in GCP, and then followed by more of an in-depth discussion around Cloud External Key Manager. And then after that, I'll turn over to Joseph, who's going to talk a little bit more about the key access justification product with you. To start off with, let's talk about the current encryption in GCP. And usually I like to start off with this scale that defines the control of the keys and the products that we have available. On the left-hand side, we have the situation where Google has complete control over the keys. On the right-hand side, it's a situation where Google has, or the customer has control over the keys. So to start off with, on the left-hand side, we're talking about default encryption. And this is basically Google's capability of encrypting all your data at rest, whatever it is, and whichever service. So whenever you bring data up into our cloud, it's always encrypted, and there's no way to turn that off. And this is Google was the first cloud to do this. And then for people who need a little bit more control, we introduced Cloud KMS. And Cloud KMS provides a global service that provides management for your software keys. And Cloud KMS performs two primary services. One, it'll allow you to actually do encryption, decryption, and signing for whatever blocks of data that you provide through an easy to use REST API. And two, it allows you to integrate with other services such as BigQuery, GCE, GCS, Cloud SQL, etc., that allows you to take the data that's encrypted in those services and ultimately control it through a key that you control in Cloud KMS. Now, beside that, we have Cloud HSM, which is basically the hardware version of Cloud KMS. And in Cloud HSM, you can actually create keys and perform all crypto operations within a fleet of HSMs that Google maintains. And these HSMs are all FIPS 140-2 level 3 devices. One of the nice properties about putting keys in HSM is that the hardware will actually make sure that the key material is never exposed, including to Google itself. Next to that, we have customer supply encryption keys, which is one of our first technologies for key management. It was tailor-made for GCS and GCE. And essentially, in this situation, the data at rest is protected by a key that the application has to provide every time it tries to access the data itself. Now, it's fairly limited, and you also have to come to terms with the fact that the application has to perform some of the key management and also has access to the keys. And it probably won't be expanded beyond GCS and GCE for those reasons. And then finally, we have a new entry, which is the private hosted HSM. And this is an offering by which if you have your own HSM device that you would like Google to host in a colo that's nearby one of our data centers, because you have workloads, for example, lift and shift workloads, then this is available for select customers. And it's something that you can talk to me or talk to one of our sales reps and get more information about. But even with those offerings, we're still left with the problem. How do I retain possession and control over my keys while I'm still trying to take advantage of the cloud for processing and storage of my data itself? So you have the cloud with all its immense computing capabilities and scale, but you still want to have that tight control over the data itself through control over the keys. What do you do? So wouldn't it be nice if you actually had something beyond the offerings, the 5 offerings that we have listed here, something that perhaps goes to the far right of the scale? And that's where Cloud External Key Manager fits in. The service is now available as GA in all regions around the world, including multi-regions. And the service is the first time that a cloud is able to allow you to separate your data fully from your keys and allow you to essentially externalize your keys outside the cloud. Some people, including analysts, are calling this hold your own key compared to bring your own keys. But essentially, it's that. And so if we start talking a little bit more about Cloud External Key Manager, you'll come to see quickly what I'm talking about. But before we go into that, let's backtrack a little bit. And I want to talk a little bit about customer managed encryption keys and how the keys hierarchy is essentially set up. So in this diagram here, you'll see the fact that when you bring data up into the cloud, let's say it's a GCS object, what we'll do first of all is we'll take that object and we'll split it into separate chunks. Okay, we'll take it into manageable chunks, and each of those chunks will have its own individual key generated for it. It's an AES key. And once the key is generated, it'll encrypt that piece of data, and these chunks of data will be replicated and then basically distributed across all the servers within our data centers. Now, you can't obviously put that key right next to the data itself. You need to actually make sure that key is protected. So you encrypt it or wrap it using some other key. So you encrypt it with a key encryption key, so to speak. And typically what customers will do is that they will use a key that's in our Cloud KMS or Cloud HSM to actually be the key encryption key for that data they have in GCS or a number of different services as well. Now, in the Cloud External Key Manager, we have a situation where you follow that same pattern, except that instead of protecting with a key encryption key that's in our KMS or HSM, that key actually resides outside. And so if you see the diagram here, a user can actually go in and either put their data in BigQuery and Compute Engine, or if they want to actually directly encrypt the data through a symmetric key that's external, they can do that as well. And these services communicate directly with our KMS, but our KMS recognizes the fact that these keys are not internal, that they're external, and then parlays a request out to our Cloud EKM service, which then communicates with the external key manager. And so in the example I gave earlier with GCS, the data encryption key is sent to KMS or HSMs to actually do encryption, decryption, wrap, and unwrap. In this example, the data encryption keys will be sent to the external key manager, which will do the wrap and unwrap and send it back to us through a secure channel. Now, the key point here is that external key that's doing the wrap and unwrap is always outside. It's strictly outside of Google, and Google does not have a copy or access to that key itself. So as you can see, there's a clear boundary now between the data and the keys themselves, which provides you with that ideal kind of security separation. Now, in terms of the integrators that have support for Cloud EKM, there's 5 currently. Half of them are cloud services, and the other half are providing infrastructure services. So in terms of cloud services, Equinix, Ionix, and Thales, they all provide cloud services. So you can sign up using their web portal, create a key, and it's basically a key that they'll manage for you in the cloud. And then the other half are providing things like HSMs. So Fortanix and Thales both provide HSMs that you can host in your own data center or on-premise. And Unbound sells software that you install into your own servers and you perform multi-part computation. But then the question becomes, why would I go through this, and what are the real benefits of External Key Manager if they're not obvious already? So number one, maintain key provenance comes to mind right away. And what I mean by that is that you'll have a situation now where you, as the person who owns the actual External Key Manager, will have really, really strong and tight knowledge around where the key was generated, where it's kept, who has access, who made a copy, and you'll have your own set of audit logs that keep track of all the usages. And these are all things that would make your compliance regulator very happy and make it very easy to articulate to them where the key is and the fact that you have ownership of it. Key access control is another really big motivator for people to use Cloud EKM. So as I've been explained in the previous slides, the keys to actually decrypt the data at rest are always outside, okay? So from that perspective, if that key was ever withheld, then there's no path by which Google can actually go and decrypt the data. So once the data is at rest, it would stay at rest. It effectively becomes crypto shredded at that point until the external key, the key is made available again. And then the third reason is centralized key management. And so in many cases, there are situations where a customer may want to have one centralized key manager where they can implement one set of policies for all their keys in their company. And this may include keys that are in the cloud, in other clouds, on premise. And this gives you a really, really nice way of actually managing and keeping the keys all in one place. And so hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, single policy, these are all reasons why you may want to use Cloud EKM. Now, in terms of configuring the service, it's very, very easy. So in the diagram that you see on the right-hand side, this is just basically our UI for creating a key. So typically you've seen the fact that you can generate a key, you can import a key, but now you'll see that there's an external manage key radio button. And if you select that, then what happens is that once you create the key externally, you'll be given a URI that will basically define that key. And then you come to our dashboard, our UI, and select externally managed key, and then you enter at the very bottom of that page, you can see the key URI field. You put that in there, you click create, and from that point forward, we'll validate that the key exists externally, and that the key, and then from that point forward, the key will show up as if it's any other key within KMS. Now, it'll look identical except for the fact that if you list the keys out, under protection level, it'll say external rather than software or hardware. Okay. A couple other things to point out about this. This is only available currently for symmetric keys. And again, it's something that is available in all regions. So that's a nice thing. Now, there's a few considerations that I'd like you to take away when you actually use this as well. First of all, these things are outside of Google infrastructure. So as a result, there's additional points of failure that are introduced as a result of this. And if it's a situation where this is really a big concern for you, where you need to have something that has a high degree of availability, a high degree of performance, low latency, all that stuff, and you want to make sure that something that has cloud scale, for example, then it may be something that's worth considering to use Cloud KMS or Cloud HSM instead, right? In general, I actually usually recommend to my customers to think of things very holistically. That when you have data, then you should be able to categorize data in terms of at least the most critical, the high importance, and maybe less importance. And based upon that, that should drive the type of key management selection that you make, with EKM perhaps being used for your most critical data. Now, errors that come from the external key manager, for example, there's a network error or the external key manager is turned off for whatever reason, then these are all going to be manifested when you actually try to use the key itself. You'll get very clear errors that say that the key manager is not accessible, the key's been disabled, things like that. And the errors themselves will show up as user errors, and they'll either show up directly through the error message, and they'll also be logged as well. So if you turn on data access logging, you'll see them in your logs. Now, there's only one URI per key, as you saw in the previous slide. And the implication of that is that you need to be in control of the availability of the external key manager yourself. And so in that case, you may have to do something like leverage VIPs or leverage things like load balancers on your side to make sure that you have a properly available system that's making your keys available for your production workloads. And please work very closely with your external key manager provider, as they should be able to provide you with guidance around the best approach in terms of choosing locations, how to set up your system to make sure that's highly available. Now, I'd like to show you a quick demo of how we use our Cloud EKM together with Ionic to protect data in BigQuery. And so in this demo, you'll see real quickly how powerful Cloud EKM can be in protecting your data in the cloud. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a new key. And so as I explained before, you have three options. You can use a generated key, meaning that the key will be created by Google, either in our Cloud HSM or our Cloud KMS service. Or you can actually use key import so that you can provide your own key material. Or the third one is externally managed key, which is what we're interested in. And I'm going to select externally managed key, and you can give it any name that you like. And as you can see, the purpose and the key type are grayed out because the only type of key that Cloud EKM supports at the moment are symmetric keys. So at the very bottom, there's a field called the key URI, and this is the only other thing that you have to provide. When you create the key in the external key manager, they'll provide you with this URI, which uniquely identifies a key. And in this case, I've already created a key in Ionic Machina, and so I'm just going to paste in here and then hit create. Oops. So just like that, the key's been created. And what's happened under the underneath the covers is that not only have we cataloged that key within our Cloud KMS, but we've actually gone through and validated and tested that key to make sure that it exists. So now I'm going to move over to BigQuery. So you can easily go and create your own data set or your table, and you can associate it with that key by simply going to advanced options, saying customer managed key, and then choosing your key. If it doesn't show up, you can just simply enter the key ID directly and just put it in here. But I've already done this to save some time. And as you can see here, when I actually run, the results that comes back, it's nothing really interesting. But this data, in order to be able to be decrypted and then the query run, actually went externally to Ionic to get the data encryption key decrypted, and they came back so that we can decrypt the data and show you the result set. Now, to prove that this is actually what happened, I'm going to go to Ionic's dashboard, and I'm going to disable this key that I just that I've associated with the BigQuery dataset. So now that that's been disabled, let me go back to BigQuery and try running that exact same query again. And so you can see that we returned an error right away. And the error message says external key provider message, so the message came directly from the EKM, that stated that the operation was denied. And so this is basically a message that's coming directly from the external key manager stating that the key was denied. And therefore, because we couldn't use the external key to actually unwrap the data encryption key, and therefore we couldn't actually run the query. So from our perspective, from Google's perspective, the data is no longer accessible. Now, to re-enable that, all we simply have to do is just re-enable this key policy, and I just did so right now. And I go back and I hit run for the same query again, and now the data is available again. So this is sort of a quick demonstration to show how tightly linked the ability to actually decrypt the data and run the query is to the key that's external. So now that you've seen how easy and powerful using Cloud EKM is with BigQuery, and it's the same with GCE as well, I'd like to turn it over to Joseph, who's going to talk about key access justification, and you'll see how the two together will take it to the next level in terms of control of your data in the cloud.
Thanks, Ilsung. As Ilsung mentioned, I'm Joseph Valente, the product manager for key access justifications here at Google Cloud. And I'm really excited to talk to you about this new product and why we think it's a huge innovation. I'm going to give an overview of how this product works and hopefully talk through why it's such a huge benefit to you if you're using external key manager on GCP. And as part of this walkthrough, I want you to imagine that you're a person who's using BigQuery today and you're just using the standard default encryption with Google. And you go ahead and run a query, and the BigQuery software needs to decrypt your data because it's encrypted by default. And so it's going to go ahead and call our internal key management system and say, please decrypt this data for me so I can run the query. The internal key management system will go ahead and authorize that decryption. The BigQuery software will perform the query, and then we're done. If you want more control, though, over this process, you may want to, instead of using the default encryption, as Ilsung discussed earlier in the presentation, have more control by using our Cloud KMS service or our Cloud Key Management Service. This key management service allows you to control the keys yourself. And if you delete one of these keys, then there's no longer any ability for the service to access your data. Even when you're using this, though, there remains two pathways that are often of concern to customers who are using the absolute most sensitive operations on GCP. And those are the administrators who continue to need, who are still needed to run the BigQuery software as well as the key management service. We obviously lock down administrative access very, very, very tightly. There's only a very small number of people who are able to exercise administrative privileges. The things that they can do are very, very limited. You can also use tools like our access approval tool to put yourself in the approval loop for these kinds of administrative operations. But the concern that is there in the most very, very sensitive cases is often too much for people, and so they would prefer to not have the concern at all. And that's where our external key management service comes in. Once you use the Cloud External Key Manager service to host your keys, our key manager administrators no longer have access to the key encryption key, as Ilson was discussing before, which is now living inside your key manager, your external key manager service. Obviously, that comes with a set of trade-offs. You need to continue working with your partner to manage the availability of this key and to make sure that you're meeting your goals in that space. But the trade-off in some limited cases is obviously worthwhile for these operations. And so if you're using the key manager service, you get this new benefit. But there's one piece missing, which is that requests are coming into the external key manager service, and you need to still have visibility over why those are happening. They can happen for three reasons. You are running a query. The BigQuery software itself is performing some operation, like it's doing a compression or a data optimization so that you can run your queries more efficiently later. Or there's some administrative operation happening. So you've opened up, for example, a ticket with Google and you've said, I'm experiencing some performance issues and I need you to go ahead and take a look at something and tell me what's going wrong. And what key access justifications gives you is it gives you visibility over each of these reasons through a justification that comes through with every request that is made to your external key manager service. What we're now going to see is how you can use blocking policy on these requests. When each request comes through, you can set a policy at your external key manager that contains any combination of sort of allow or deny rules that you want. You can say, for example, block all access. And the key will become completely unavailable and Google will have no access to your data whatsoever. You can block just the administrator rows that are the four green rows at the bottom here. And that will stop Google administrators from having access to your data, even though you'll still be able to continue using customer-initiated or system operations to continue using your service. And what this gives you is the ability to become the ultimate arbiter of access to your data. You are the person who is the ultimate decider of when your data can be accessed and for what reason it can be accessed. So what we're excited to announce today is that Key Access Justifications is now in beta for Google Compute Engine, Persistent Disk, and BigQuery, covering the transition from data at rest to data in use. And the exciting part about this software is that when you use it together with External Key Manager, you can become the ultimate arbiter of access to your data. And this works together with the integrity commitments that are contained in our privacy website as well. So you know that Google doesn't have any kind of backdoor access or other ways of getting access to your data. It really works the way it's described. We need to come to you and query your external key manager to decrypt your data, and we give you a reason when that decryption happens that you can use to determine whether or not to grant us access. What does this mean for you? You become the ultimate arbiter of access to your data. No other cloud provider is offering you this level of control. Your keys are going to live outside Google with no administrative access, and you'll have visibility over why those keys are accessed, with the ability to deny Google's access for any reason. So, the fine print. Can you turn this on yourself? Not right now. We have a blog post that you can head to, which has a link on it where you can put express your interest, and we'll be in touch with you and consider whether you're eligible based on a variety of criteria. You will need to use Google's external key manager product to use key access justifications. For the reasons we've described, obviously the great benefit comes from having the keys outside of Google. And so, yes, while this is only, while there are some trade-offs that are involved in choosing whether you use external key manager, we think that for those very, very sensitive operations, those are the ones where you're going to want to consider using key access justifications as well. So what data is in scope for key access justifications? Generally speaking, it's the high sensitivity data. So you can think about it as things like the BigQuery table data, but not your BigQuery query string. And so you should read the documentation when you're onboarded and consider these things when you're making the decision of what information you want to architect as part of this service. I'm now going to walk through a demonstration that talks about how you can set up key access justifications and use it with some of our partners.
Let's take a look at how I can use a variety of external key management tools to set blocking policy that uses key access justifications. Here I am using the Talus tool to set the set of allowed key access justifications. And now I'm going to try and do the same thing with the tool by Fortanix. I'm also going to try and do the same thing using the Ionic tool, which I'll continue using for the rest of the purposes of this demonstration. As you can see, any partner that supports the use of key access justifications will allow you to use these justifications to gate access to your keys based on the inbound requests that contain those justifications. Let's go ahead and use the example of running a query using BigQuery, with a table that's encrypted by an externally managed key. I press the Run button and the query is successful. And when I go to my external key manager, I can see why. The customer-initiated access value was used to decrypt my table, and because I've allowed that value, the query was successful. Later on in the day, I'm going to go ahead and check my external key manager again. Here I can see that a new decryption request has been granted, this time for a Google-initiated system operation, because BigQuery needed to do this in order to compress my data and perform further optimizations. Now, if I were to have an issue where I needed to contact Google support, and Google support needed to make an access to my data, they would need to use this tool which validates the justification, or validates the case number that I've opened to see whether they should have access. When they go ahead and press the send button here, you'll see that the access gets denied. If I go back to my external key manager page, I can see that a request was made with customer-initiated support as the reason, but because I'm denying that value, they were unable to make that access. I actually do need to give them access though, because I really need them to check this out. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that customer-initiated support value from the deny statement. If the administrator tries to make the access now again, using the same support case number, it will be validated first on our side, checking whether that case is a real case and whether it's open and assigned to the person in question, and whether the administrator has the appropriate privileges. But then it's also evaluated again by the key manager, and this time it's allowed. And I can see the customer-initiated support here in the values column.
So hopefully you got a better understanding of how key access justifications and external key manager work together in practice to make you the ultimate arbiter of access to your data, and why that's such an important thing to have when you're putting very, very highly sensitive information on the cloud. What are some of the key takeaways we want you to leave with this presentation? The first of all is keep your data in our cloud, not your keys. You're going to get this unprecedented level of control and keep possession of your keys used to protect your data using the external key manager to store them outside of GCP. We also have an upcoming Cloud EKM white paper that you should look out for. It's going to talk about some best practices on how to architect the Cloud EKM with GCP so that you can take into account some of the reliability concerns you might have. Then, if possible, you should use key access justifications to get you that extra amount of granularity and visibility over access to your data through the use of these key access policies. And when you store your keys outside of GCP, you can set these policies up to deny Google access for whatever reason. So you can continue using your service as you were beforehand, while knowing that you're in control and having the ability to block Google for reasons that you don't want. We hope you've really gotten a lot out of this presentation today, and we're extremely excited to continue talking to you about these new products as we continue to expand our offerings in this space. Thanks very much, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Bye now.